Welcome back, everyone, to the PMR podcast. My name's Andrew. I'm an alcoholic addict. It's great to be back on. I was just talking to Mitch. It's been like a week since we've been on Zoom, and because I really do like see this as a meeting, I was like, damn, I gotta get back on and talk with this man. So yeah, man, I'm happy to see you. And I think we got a great episode coming up, bro.
Yeah, I do too. I'm happy to see you as well. My name is Mitch. I'm an alcoholic addict, and yeah, we little break there. But I'm excited to be back, and it is definitely a very much a meeting for me as well. I always look forward to ripping them with you. And today we got something a little special, episode 18. We're probably gonna do a little series on this, just going through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. There are 12-step programs for a lot of things. There's NA has 12 steps. There's a bunch actually. I've actually been learning about a bunch of other ones recently. But yeah, we're gonna go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I think is going to be really interesting to do because Andrew and I are both actively working on those. And so we're not going to be speaking from a place of like, this is how you do it and this is the right way to do it and blah, 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 blah. That's not our intention at all. We're going to read them as they're written in the book and pretty much explain them as we understand it at this very point, which may change, which probably will change. But I'm very excited to get into that.
Might change tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So please do not take us straight up on it, or not straight up, but please don't think that we're like, this is how you do it, and this is how we did it, and this is how you should do it. This is we are going to be purely speaking from experience to this point on the 12 steps.
Yeah, I mean, our word is not the ultimate authority. I think,
Not even close.
I think we say that a lot on this episode, right? But
Yeah.
and in general on this podcast, but we are like you said, we're consistently, constantly learning, and looking back on these episodes too. And in a couple of years, we might be like, oh well, I have a completely different understanding of whatever that topic is.
Yeah.
Just because we're out here, we're imperfect, but we're doing our best to to follow this program. Both of us being in AA. Mitch, before we started, I just wanted to ask because this series is your brainchild. You texted me about it earlier this week, and I hadn't really even really crossed my mind, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea, but I kind of want to know like where did this idea come from, and what is your motivation? Like what do we want to share? Because people can just go online and look up what's the 12 steps of AA, and then boom, they'll have the words there. They'll have a 1 through 12 laid out on a website. So what do you think we want to add here? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, it just kind of plays into our central theme of trying to open it up a little bit, try to explain things a little bit better to people that may not have experience with it or an understanding of it. I think it can be traditionally like uh just kind of glossed over, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they do AA and he works a 12-step program and that's kind of where it stops, or he or she works a 12-step program and that's kind of where it stops. I think a lot of people would be familiar with the term 12-step program, but when it comes to like what they actually are, I think that like people probably go as far as what you said. They probably, I mean, I don't know if they'd actually look it up, but if they do look over it and be like, oh, that seems cool. So I
Right.
just kind of wanted to open it up a little bit more, kind of show uh, what we do a little bit, and yeah, I think it'll be interesting.
And I think another thing too that I kind of want to just bring up and maybe even talk about a little bit before we get into just the meat of the episode, which is diving into step one and beyond. It's funny, we had a conversation before we started recording today, and you were saying, we were kind of laying out the schedule, and then we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, yeah, but we might spend a whole hour talking about step one, and that's just kind of how you and I go. We could talk for hours about this stuff. But kind of what I want to offer as a disclaimer before we dive in, and this is just based off my experience with these steps, is, you know, looking at AA from the outside, I think a lot of people might have it might be a misconception, a very popular misconception that AA is a cult and it's a bunch of fanatics and a bunch of religious fanatics and we're reading the Bible in there, and I think, not to rule religion out, but it's not a requirement to practice organized religion to be a part of AA. And we're going to dive into that more as we get into these steps. But just like, because that turned me off to AA as an outsider looking in when I was first going to meetings, was thinking, I had to have read the Bible and been, very familiar with all the lessons from it and be a regular church goer and everything. And those are wonderful things. Don't get me wrong. If you read the Bible, if you go to church, that's terrific. That's a strong basis of faith. But what I was scared of was thinking that it was a requirement and that's what I needed, to do. And if I didn't, then I wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to offer that because that was a big turnoff for me,
I think,
just with my own beliefs.
yeah, I think it's a big turnoff for a lot of people. It was for me as well. I think it's like when you're considering AA and you're in that position where you're considering recovery and stuff like that, you are like quite literally scrambling to find any reason not to do it. Right. And
Mm.
so the religion one is an easy one to point at and be like, I liked it, but too religious for me, or too
Yep.
to this, that, and the other for me. So that's a big one. I think that kind of gatekeeps a lot of people, to be honest. I know it kept me out for a while, or it kept me from completely buying in, I think, for a while. So I agree with you on that. But you ready to jump into step one?
Yeah, let's do it. Tell me what it is.
All right. Step one. Step one is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. So we just break that down a little bit. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. How did that go for you?
So I think, I mean, right off the bat, this is a two-part step,
Yeah.
right? Um, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. I think my experience, if I could bring myself back to treatment, it's April 2021. Um, I am extremely prideful. I'm still extremely prideful, but I'm hurting. I'm traumatized from having, been kind of forcefully removed from in a home and a job. Rightfully so. I was a complete liability, but my ego was bent out of shape, to say the least. Having been, as an addict, it's funny. I was talking about this in a meeting yesterday, but we think we're so good at hiding shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
nobody knows that I'm, how bad it is or what I'm doing and everything else. And I remember calling that first, night or maybe second night in treatment, calling a couple of my friends during phone time. And I say, listen, you'll never guess where I am. I'm in drug treatment, or an alcohol treatment. And I was expecting like the what? Like, why are you there? What do you mean? And they were like, oh, like,
That's good.
took you long enough, pretty much. And that was like, again, it's just a fucking blow to my ego. Um, because I thought I was great at controlling and manipulating people and misleading everyone, and having everybody think that I was doing all right. And to kind of sit there and to really reflect on, like, wow, like there are people, who are friends who I haven't seen in a year plus, or um who I really didn't even think saw the worst of my using, who think it might be a good idea that I got some help. And at Heron Wellness, which is the treatment that I went to, they have a group room. And I remember in the first week, you know, what I loved about Heron was that it had a very open approach to recovery, and like you said, as you've been in your own recovery kind of employment, you've seen like wow, like there's a lot of different avenues that people take here. There's smart recovery, which is a lot of CBT, a cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a little bit too intense for me in terms of technical behavioral techniques and everything that kind of went over my head, but it works for some people. So all the power to it. There's refuge recovery, which is Buddhist based. There's NA, and then there's AA. And that first week, there was a lot thrown at me. Um, all of those, all four of those kind of recovery tracks were thrown at me. And I remember the first time that I cracked open the 12 and 12, 12 steps and 12 traditions. It's like a branch off of the AA big book. And, I think kind of funny enough, we were looking and studying step one, and I saw this step and it said, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Um, First of all, what I like to add in my head is because I'm a drug addict as well as an alcoholic. I mean, it's all the same. But I just kind of added the line in there for myself. I admitted that I was powerless over alcohol and drugs of any
Yep.
form.
Me too.
And I looked at that line and I was personally offended um because it was an attack on my masculinity. It was attack on my dominance over all things, and it was an attack on my ability to master um substance and master the people around me, and create a narrative for the people around me to think that it was one way when it really wasn't. And I really honestly sat there and really didn't think that I had been powerless over alcohol or drugs. And you know, I don't know when the switch happened for me, Mitch. I really don't. And I'd love to hear it from your perspective as well. But like, I kind of sat there and I read through. I kind of glossed over the reading and the explanation of it. But I didn't really ever kind of get it until somebody pulled me aside, somebody who worked there, because they could tell I was struggling, and they're like, "You don't think you're powerless over this, do you?" And I was like, "No, I don't think I'm powerless over, my drugs of choice, opiates and benzos and everything else, whatever it was that I was taking." And he said, in the morning when you wake up, like after the initial shame and guilt of just being alive another day, what do you think of? And I'm like, I think about getting high. Like, he's like, so you think it's probably like a physical requirement every day that you take these substances? And I was like, absolutely. And he said, do you bend your schedule and your will and your finances and your profession and your education and your personal relationships all dependent on the availability of substance? And I said, well, yeah, like obviously, like I can't do anything if I'm not using. And he said, did you hear what you just said? I said, yeah. He said, repeat it. I said, I can't do anything if I'm not using. And he said, that sounds like powerlessness to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, but that was at least that first part, because that second part didn't come for a while, like I knew that I was powerless, but I still had a very tough time admitting my life had become unmanageable, because I didn't want to imagine a life without substance. I thought that an unmanageable life would be a life without being able to use. Um, but yeah, I mean, when did that switch happen for you? And I'm curious to know too, because your timeline, like, when did these steps come into your life? Like, when was this first step first introduced to you?
Yeah. So I agree with you though. The only word I had an issue with on step one was powerless, because for
Mm,
a long time I was like, and I remember even being in meetings and being like, shouldn't we like not promote powerlessness? Shouldn't we promote like ourselves and me, and like I can do it, you know? Why are we beating ourselves down and saying we're powerless and saying like our lives have become unmanageable? My life is manageable. I'm not powerless. And it took me a while to answer that question. Um it took me probably a couple of years into my recovery to really completely gel with that, and to completely admit that in a real way. I think it's kind of like it's. I think you'll find right on the other side of that door of admitting that you were powerless some relief, and I think
mhm.
that's something that people might not expect. I think it's like, oh, I have to hold on to this shit. I have to hold on to this shit. I have to hold on to my life. I have to hold on to my ability to manage it, to control it, like keyword control. And I think as soon as you can truly admit that you are powerless over drugs and alcohol, and truly admit that your life is not going to work if you continue to have those substances in your life, you're ready for step two. And I think it's like, for me, also, I wanted to, as you were talking, I want this spurred something in me. I've been hearing a lot in meetings about, and just in general, the 12 steps. I think people might think that you work the 12 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you're done. And I had
Mm,
that perception for a little bit. And then I had a perception of you work the 12 steps and then you take a break for a while. And then when you need it again, you work the 12 steps, which is some people do it like that. But through conversations with my sponsor and stuff, I've come to my own understanding of like the 12 steps are happening at all times. All right.
right.
We learn things in the 12 steps that we do on a daily basis, and therefore you're always working the 12 steps. For me, that makes the most sense. Even though I am kind of like a person that like wants to be like, let's do all 12 and then I'm done.
Hmm.
But after I've grown to a place where it's kind of like it's a flowing thing. You're never done. You know, you're never like, oh, that's all that, all good with that kind of thing. So I wanted to point that out, that it is kind of a flowing thing, at least from my perspective. But um, yeah, I guess that's everything for me on step one. I think it took me a couple of years to fully buy into that, and then once I did feel a lot of relief. I felt
Right.
like, yeah, felt a lot of relief.
I think too, like step one, I've heard this before. Step one is the only step that I need to do perfectly. Like all the other steps, like are kind of a continuum. Like I might be at a certain place with my higher power every day, day to day that, some days my faith isn't very strong. Some other days it's very strong. Like there may be times down the line where prayer and meditation is very strong or very weak. There may be times when, I really don't want to let go of my resentments because I think they make me strong. And there may be other times when I'm entirely ready to have all of these resentments and these shortcomings and these defects removed from my life. But every single day, I have to wake up and understand that I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life is unmanageable when I'm using.
Yeah.
And not to say that it's manageable when I'm not. Like when I'm sober, my life is still at times completely unmanageable. And
Yeah,
in
which
fact, most of the time it's completely unmanageable.
yeah, but we're doing a lot better than we would be, and I know that for a fact. And the other thing to that also is like it is definitely a step we need to work every day. And also, I had this the last year a little bit, like we really do kind of start to fail to remember how bad it was. I know that's like a
Mm-hmm.
big thing in the meetings. Like once you start to think like it wasn't that bad, I bet I could try it again. That's your addiction creeping back in, and we need to like hammer that. Like, no. Like I agreed at a certain point that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. And if you want to
Yep.
try it again, you know, and this is a little harsh, but I won't even. I've had people say like, if you want to try it again, try it again. Like if you want to try to manage it again, if you think you can do that, then go ahead.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not something I'm even willing to entertain really.
No, and it's messed up, right? Because we can make all this progress and be progressing through, and our lives can get better, right? We can get. I've heard this said before. You know, these steps specifically. The meetings go along with it, but the steps specifically can free us from this disease if practiced daily. But the things that they give us, the external things like our families back and loved ones and relationships and jobs and homes and material things like those, as soon as the steps, as soon as the foundation of our life, which is this program, disappears, you know all of those material things are gone. um so almost, more important than like accruing all of these things that improve my ego and improve, my perception of myself and my self-confidence and my feeling of success. Like the only true feeling of success I need, and it's not to say that I shouldn't, be driven and that I should just rest on my laurels after working, doing step work, and that I shouldn't be, you know, inspired and have goals in life. But the only real thing that I need to do every day is try, like, to the best of my ability, and in staying, in constant contact with a higher power as best as I can, like to follow these steps. And step one too, like, I don't know, like, if it was the same for you too, but and I cannot really emphasize enough how important this step is every single day, like in my life. Because when those thoughts start creeping in, and those thoughts do start creeping in, like, you know what, as long as I don't go back to the pills and the powder, as long as, I could smoke weed, and I know like that this is a common theme for people who use harder drugs, is like, oh, we could get on what in AA is called the marijuana maintenance program. Like, but that's just a jail cell in and of itself. Like, that's a prison. Um, because I truly believe, like, I can never get high or drunk again without feeling immense shame and guilt, because I know what it's like on the other side of it. Like, it's like people have said, I don't know if you've heard this in meetings, but like, I have when you relapse, you got a belly full of booze and a head full of AA, and it's not a good combination.
Nope.
Like,
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, that's really bad.
and I don't, today I don't want to do that. And my sponsor, he hammers it into me every day. He's like, listen, we're gonna get through these other steps, because I'm like you, like, I'm like, I want to knock these off quick. I want to be fixed. I want to get to 12. I'm all set. We're done. We put it away, and I don't have to worry about any of this ever again. He's like, number one, Andrew, that's not how it works. Like,
Yeah.
either I'm goal oriented, but the goal here is like, is steadiness day to day. It's not we reach this high, this mountaintop, goal, and it's all done and we've reached enlightenment.
Right.
Like, it's a continuous cycle right through it. And he says, because of that, all, what I want you to focus on today is that first step. um and the first step gives me perspective, right? Because, like I said, in treatment, after a week or so, whatever, I was able to admit that I was powerless over alcohol and drugs. But then I sat there, and this is how, like, sick the active addict mind is I sat there, and although I hadn't used, I was about a week removed from using. I sat there, I said, is it that bad that I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs? Like, I want to be powerless over alcohol and drug. Like, that's my identity. That's who I am. I had become such a shell of a human being that that's the only thing that I could really identify with, was like, yeah, that's it. That's what I am. Like, that's what I do. So I do drugs and drink,
Yeah.
and that's going to be my whole life. Like, I already had it carved out. Um, and the manageability thing was like, my life isn't unmanageable. Um, because what I did is I kept lowering expectations,
Yeah.
like lower, lower, lower. Like, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to be bragging because we know where it ended up. But like coming out of high school, whatever, I had good grades. I went to a good school. I was going to be a college athlete, and I lowered those expectations over that next 4 years. It's like I'm going to be a mediocre student. I'm not going to really spend any time making friends, and I'm not a college athlete anymore. Like after that, ambitions about getting involved in whatever it was, career wise, having high ambitions there and maybe going to further schooling and getting another degree and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, no, that doesn't really cater to my drug use. So what should I do? I think I'm going to move away and work an hourly wage job on this island and live in like pretty much live in squalor. You know, what I'm rambling on about is that I changed every single expectation and standard for myself to continue to pretend that my life was manageable while being an active drug addict.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't have to forfeit my values today like that because I recognize that my life is unmanageable when I'm using drugs. It's unmanageable today and in many ways as well. Like you said, it's a lot better like in most respects, but when I'm using drugs and alcohol, I have to forfeit all the things that I care about besides that. And I don't have to do that today. And that's like true insanity is sitting in a treatment center and being like, my life wasn't that unmanageable. I still got a paycheck and I had a bed to sleep in. And, my therapist sat there and was like, is that all you want in the world? Like, we limit ourselves so much, like handicap ourselves. And it's not even the material stuff. Like, I sat every single day in Nantucket or Denison or whatever you want to wherever I was, and I truly hated myself. Like I couldn't look myself in the mirror. I didn't have any standards for myself, and that was a product of me, like, number one, not having dealt with a bunch of emotional trauma from the past, and number two, just having absolutely zero self-respect. I was like, yeah, I deserve this. I deserve to be miserable. Like, this is going to be my life forever. And if
Yeah.
that's not unmanageability, man, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, bro. And I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I love that feeling. I loved it. I still have
Mm-hmm.
issues in my sobriety where I try to conjure that feeling of pain, blah 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 blah. But we're getting better with it. What I wanted to say though is that like this is a suggested program, and this is a suggested way of recovery, and it's literally written right before. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. That's a big thing for me, and I think it needs to be pointed out that everything that has ever been told to me has been a suggestion. I've never
Mm.
been told you need to do this. Everything has either been spoken from experience or suggested. And I love that, bro, because especially as an addict and an alcoholic, whenever I had been told to do something, I would turn around and go the opposite way. So the suggestion thing is way more effective in terms of like, I did these, like, let's say I'm talking to a sponsor or something like that. They would tell me, I did these steps. This is what my life is like now.
Right.
If that's something that you would like, try the steps. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I had a big thing, especially with this meeting. My home group is like, it's all these successful people in their own personal lives, married, happy, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I want that. So if this is something that you want, if you see people in recovery working a 12-step program and doing well, and that's something that you want, well, this is what we did to try to do that. And there's other ways to do it. And like, but this is what we did. This is what worked for us. I just
Right.
think that's an important thing to point out, that it's not like we're telling you to do this or you need to do this or blah 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 blah, because I think people get caught up on that too, and I did as well. I remember looking at the 12 steps on the wall in a meeting when I went to in Ohio, and I was like, that shit is fucking crazy. I'm not
Oh
doing
yeah.
that shit. Especially, and this is a good intro into step two, because when I saw that, I was like, no. Um, you want to read step 2 for us?
Absolutely. Um, the last thing I'll say too about step one is like I don't want to surrender ever. Um, I thought surrender meant, you know, you lose, you give up. Um, I know in your athletic background, like you never taught to give up. Like, and it's the same for me. Um, and even beyond that, again, it's like a masculinity thing. Like I don't give up. Like look, I'm big fucking bad Andrew. Um, and what somebody pointed out to me and suggested to me, um, which is another thing that I love, is I don't just get told to do things. Like I get suggested. I suggest you do this. I think you should try this because then ultimately it's my decision. My ego loves that. I'm like, well, all right, he suggests it, but I'm the one, I'm not just taking orders out here. But somebody suggested that I read a certain definition of surrender, and this definition in the dictionary is to join the winning side. Um, in war or battle, there's a prior part to it. It's like lay down your arms or something like that. But the gist of the definition is to join the winning side. I think that definition helped me to kind of conceptualize like what this surrender really is.
I like
Um,
that.
which is it was I was fighting for the losing side in my own head, heart, like soul. That part, like I was, willing to fight to the death, and that was a losing. That was the side of the battle. Like that was the team that was getting crushed, like absolutely routed. Um, and I laid down my arms and my weapons when I took this first step. And what I did was I crossed over the line and joined the winning side. Really, it doesn't mean I'm winning all the time, but I'm on while I'm sober, while I'm in recovery actively, I'm on the winning team, you know, and I'm not personally always winning, doing great, but this team I'm on, like, and that includes you and my sponsor and everyone from the meetings I go to and all the millions of people in this program, like this is the winning team. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. It's a good definition, but moving on to step two. And I did the same thing after I took step one. I was like battered and I was like, all right, we're done, right? That's it. We're finished. I'm all set. I'm a powerless. That's great. And then I saw power with a capital P, and I was like, you gotta be shitting me. Like, ugh, all right, sorry. Step two, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Um, Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with that one?
That's a big one too. I mean, it's another one that needs to be daily. Um, and it's another step that I've heard multiple times in the room, being something that people have come back to and continuously worked on, which makes sense to me because I've done that as well. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. Well, early on, there wasn't a power greater than me.
No.
Out of recovery, definitely not. And I remember hating religion. I remember hate is a strong word. I remember I greatly did not gel with it.
Mm-hmm.
I even went to like a Catholic school, or yeah, it was pretty much a Catholic school, and just like I would find any way to like we had to take one religion class a semester or something like that, and any way I could to just put it to that teacher, I would,
Yep.
any way I could try to like dissect and be like, well, that doesn't hold up with this doesn't hold up with that, anything to keep me in first place. And so when it comes to came to believe in a power greater than ourselves, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Um, to be honest with you, that like really, really, I mean, I always had a sense of a higher power kind of early in recovery. I kind of attributed it to my uncle who had passed away before I met him, kind of like loosely.
Right.
And then I just started to see things that I couldn't explain and experience things that I couldn't explain. And so I kind of kept that in that way. And then truly, I think like in the last 2 or 3 years is when I really came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Uh, and that's another kind of release thing. That's another kind of like, a lot of the steps here are really trying to wear away at that ego and self-will. Pretty much all of them really trying to wear that down, trying to take my control of situations out of it because my life had become unmanageable when I was controlling it, right? And so um this is a super super important one, and it also ties into how like we get caught up in the God thing. I mean, they changed it to higher power. I'm not sure which edition they did, but it used to say God,
Mhm.
and it's been changed to higher power, or in this instance, a power. But that helped me, I think, just because I had all those preconceived notions about religion in a God way. It really comes down to this, bro. Can you, as an alcoholic addict, believe that there is something more than you? I mean, literally greater than you. Can you sit down and be like, I am not, the world is not revolving around me? And that's a huge step. Like, it takes so much pressure off your shoulders. It takes so
Right.
much, it's just so alleviating that it's like, for me, once I started doing that and truly believing in that, it's kind of like, all right, I can take my hands off the wheel now. I don't have to like have a death grip on, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? Da, 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 da. Like, you will be provided for if you believe in a higher power. And I've,
Mm.
I've come to truly believe in that.
I think again, kind of just breaking down like this step, and this was kind of what was done for me. I mean, I came to believe, you know, I, it's not asking me, and this was what was taught to me is it's not the step does not require me to like point out how this higher power has already saved me. Like this is almost a future minded step.
Mm,
Like it's like I've come to believe that if I take certain steps going forward, that a power greater than myself will restore me to sanity. Like, and I think being the same type of naysayer that you were, dude, like I loved pointing out the flaws in religion. Um, Pointing out all of all of the unlikely coincidences and the contradictions and the real world evidence of look at all the suffering and the pain and blah 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 down the line. And there is a lot of suffering and pain in the world, and that's true. But what I discovered working this step is that this tendency for me to get so I got so angry all the time about and irritable, and like I would lash out about religion. Unprovoked too. My parents, my brother, my friends, they kind of sit there and be like, where is this coming from? Um, what I think it came down to for me was like fear, right? Because I didn't have any sort of faith that was based, an actual faith. It was a fear-based faith. It was, and it's not because I grew up with a vengeful God or with a fear-based religion, but because I grew up and the God of my understanding had failed me over and over again, because when I prayed I asked for selfish things, and we've talked about that in spirituality episodes. um but I feared that there wasn't anything up there or around us that was a power greater than me. And you know I feared the implications of me not understanding something, like there being some sort of all powerful force or a god or a being or whatever it may be that was in control or had an influence on the events of the world and the formation of the earth and everything else. My ego was so big. I was like, number one, that no, I'm in complete control of what's going on here. And number two, I was so scared that I might not be in control. Um, I was like, if there's something else in control, then what does that make me? That makes me just like a little nothing. And I understand today that I am just a little nothing. I'm one of whatever 8 billion people on this planet. Like, um, it's not to say I don't matter to other people, to myself. It's not to say my life doesn't have meaning, but I'm one of 8 billion people and I'm one of trillions and trillions of living things on this earth. And this earth is just a little rock hurtling through space. And when I break it down to that, dude, I'm like, fuck, like, I guess I'm not like all powerful. And I think another part of this step, sitting there and again, really kind of taking this step, probably 6 months into sobriety, really actually working with a sponsor, is I really love to justify that I wasn't insane. Sanity, right? Sanity is um, a clear-minded, sound judgment. Um, and it's funny. It's like it's easy to laugh about, but and again, my sponsor, he's big, dictionary guy. He said, why don't you look up the definition, the dictionary definition of sanity? And I know when I found that, sound judgment, clear thinking, it changed my view a little bit because I kind of had this idea that sanity was a little bit the same, similar to manageability. Like, yeah, I kind of have everything under control, and and although like I make mistakes, and I've committed crimes and everything else, like, yeah, everything's okay. Um, and when I saw that, like, sound judgment and clear thinking, and I thought about day to day decision making, um, I couldn't say that I had either of those two things down. Sound judgment, clear thinking. And I got countless examples of not doing that. And I think that just the biggest example is I would wake up and absolutely handicap myself for the day, putting myself out of commission, unable to perform at work, unable to talk to people, unable to hold a relationship with my parents and my family. That's not sound judgment and clear thinking. Um, and I've read this, and there's a little book that goes kind of in tandem with the AA book. It's called The Little Red Book. It's a step book, and what it says right at the beginning of this step is that no alcoholic acts sanely when drinking. Um, and I remember putting the first drink or drug into my body. The craving for another would begin, and honestly, the craving, like, just for chaos would ensue. And it's when I thought about that, it really changed my perspective on sanity. And it made me a little bit more willing to again kind of surrender to the fact that I might not be in control here.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point to point out the sanity thing. I was gonna say as you were speaking about that like when you're in active addiction, when I was in active addiction, I was insane. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just like insane is the only way to describe it. I mean, I literally had like a, I just remember one specific night I was watching these YouTube videos. It might have been like a week before I went to rehab, like 3, 4 in the morning, just off of everything, and like just like I was like staring in the mirror. I was like pacing around the room. I was like, bro, you are fucked up, bro. Like you, and I was like, thinking all these crazy things, and it was just like pure insanity. There's no like manic everything, you name it. And it's just like, can you admit that that happened? Like once you've gotten a little bit of sobriety under your belt and your brain starts to work a little bit again, uh it's like, can we admit that we were insane, and can we believe in this thing that's greater than us to restore us to sanity, restore
Yeah.
us to something flat at least. You know, when I was in rehab, we did a lot of talking about like how to get our heads in a stable condition. Like, because we are so used to operating on this like up and down and around and in and
Hmm.
out and over here and over there, that it's like, can we wake up in the morning and do some things that can, because we might wake up a little wiry, can we wake up in the morning and do some things that can get us to a flat standpoint so that when things come up during the day, as they will, we can handle those in a more human or non-alcoholic way, to the
Hmm.
best of our abilities. And that was important for me to hear early,
Right.
for sure.
Right. I can't. What I've found is I can't if it's just me. Like if I'm not, and this is my experience with this. Like, and I think as we move through the steps, as we discuss further down the line, step 11, etc. Like, I never wanted to pray because I didn't know what I was praying to. And I also never like I was like if I get on my knees, like I'm admitting that I'm subservient to this thing, and like it's just like it's I was just like it's so demeaning is what I thought. Like, but what I've found is getting on my knees and praying, and even a brief prayer, like it's an act. What it is for me is it's an act of humility. Like and I everything that I did in active addiction truly was like, and it wasn't because I was just egotistical and that's just who I was. I mean, I was running from so many fears and terrible memories and insecurities about who I was, but my everything I did was out of ego. Like, because I wanted to mask how scared I was to just be me, and how afraid I was of social situations, or of people knowing who I really was, or of just being my authentic self. So everything I did was out of ego. Um and what I've found, and this is part of step 2, is like coming is in the process of coming to believe that there is a power out there that can restore us to sanity. It's like, can I get on my knees? Or even like if the get on my knees thing is tough, like can I sit quietly and talk to a power greater than myself? Just talk. Like, if you don't want to use the word pray, just I'm just speaking with this power, whatever it is. Like, and I was so alarmed, dude, when I first started to do this, like how egotistical am I? Because it was like pulling teeth. I didn't think it'd be that hard, and I sat there and I would kind of grip my teeth and be, and it was because it was so much ego involved, and that's like the death of ego is praying and saying, you know what, God, like I don't have this.
Hmm.
Like I need your guidance. I don't have the answers. I don't have the expertise. I don't have this experience. I don't have the strength. I need to lean on you. I am riddled with weakness, and I'm not a bad person because of it, but I'm human, and I don't want to go through this alone. Like, help me, please. Um
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And I'm just like, I've been super conscious, or trying to be super conscious recently, of like how I speak and what I say in terms of myself. And I think that it's like kind of plays into that to an extent, that like I've been really trying not to uh there's got to be a medium between being like very honest about yourself and where you're at, and especially talking with your higher power and stuff, and also not like beating yourself up. because I've traditionally liked that, right? And it's like, can I speak honestly? Can I speak honestly in a way that's also not like I'm going to get some shots in at Mitch too?
Hmm.
I think that that's been a big growth, big thing that I've been trying to grow through recently, especially with like, as we'll see, some of these steps do highlight things that we've done, do highlight, do bring back feelings of shame, remorse, things like that. And it is a fine line where it's like, and I'm going to use the word proud, but it's like, that's also, everything needs to be taken in moderation because we are very much not a moderation group of people. So it's
Nope.
like, I can say that I'm proud of myself. And then at the same time, I just get, I get a voice in my head that's like, keep going with that. You know what I mean? I
Oh
just want
yeah.
to be able to be honest in a way that doesn't drag me down and doesn't lift me up. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And that conversation develops through speaking with your higher power, I think, from my experience to this point. That's a conversation that is continually growing. But it is interesting that the third step is, one, two, and three are all pretty closely tied. It's
Mm.
kind of action become like in terms of action, like writing and speaking and stuff like that really starts to come on step four. So I like that we're doing one, two, and three right now because step three goes hand in hand with step two. You have to believe in a greater and a higher power to be able to do step three. And step three is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And there's that trigger word, God. But we could, for
And
me,
him.
that's right. And him, right. We can change that up to made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of our higher power as we understood them. Um, but that you mean you have to believe in it first. Everything in this thing kind of flows. So how do you feel about step three?
Yeah, I mean, step three is not possible without step two. Um, I think again, like the the aim for me in these first three steps is the death of ego. Um, you know, as we move into the other, the action steps, the writing steps, we start to see like the breaking down of our defects and everything else. But this is like, I think, a prerequisite to beginning to do the work on ourselves and building us back. Building me back up is tearing down like my misconceptions about how powerful I am and about how much control I have over any situation. Um, and I think step three is kind of like the final blow to my self sufficiency.
Hmm.
And self sufficiency again, like being self sufficient in a lot of respects is not a bad thing. Like again, and I think this is a culture too. It's funny, like we live in a culture that like very much promotes self sufficiency. Like go out and get the degree and live on your own and go succeed and like be self sufficient. And that's a great thing, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about spiritual self sufficiency. Like, can I be in tune with my emotions and my own spiritual being, like without the help of a higher power? And for the longest time I did, because I was my everything. I was my higher power. I was the devil. I was everything in between. Um, and step three is where we really begin to see action. And where I've began to see action, like, and I can't harp on this shit enough. Like, I have to practice one through three every day. Like, because if I every day my disease wants to chip away a little bit at every fucking one of those steps. Like every single day my disease is telling me in the back of my head, like, you don't need to pray. Like, you're fine. You prayed yesterday. You don't need, you don't need to ask like God. Like, you're just wasting your time. Like, you can handle this yourself. You're wasting time that you could be spending dealing with this problem as it already is. Like, you're not going to be able to finish this. Like, again, it's like it's a hamster wheel, and it's like it gets out of control. Um, I can't emphasize how important prayer has been for me. Um, because my default is like tornado of escalating anxious thoughts. Like, and prayer has offered me like a bit of perspective. Um, I want at all times, my disease wants me to be anxious, wants me to be bouncing from one activity to the next, wants me to be completely mindless instead of mindful. It wants me to not be able to sit in silence and in peace. And the thing that I have been practicing in the past, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. I don't know how long it's been. It's been less than a year. It's been more than half a year. But I wake up, and the first activity I do of the day is I pray. Um, might be for 2 minutes, it might be for 20 minutes, depending on where my head's at. But I sit quietly and I don't do anything but talk to my God. Um, and I know it's a little bit off of like the actual meat of step three. I apologize for that. But
Step 11.
like, yeah. But that's been me giving my will and my life over to God. Like,
Hmm.
making that decision, like, it wasn't enough for me, and it's still not enough for me to just say to my sponsor in a third step prayer, or what, or however one take, anyone else takes this step. Like, for me, it was not enough to just say to my sponsor, like, yes, I am, I give my will and my life over to God, because I've made a lot of false promises in my life. Like, I've told a lot of people that I'm going to do one thing and I do the complete opposite. Like, this step, my will in my life is happening every single day, and my self will is coming back every single day to try to take control of my life. And I can't practice step three if I don't spend time with God. And that's what I do, man. Is I try to spend time with God in the morning, and it's not great. Like, I don't sit there. I'm not like I don't have the right words. I don't, my I swear when I'm talking to God, like, it's not great. I mean, that's something, a point to improve on, but like, just letting go of the ego, and just being like, you know what, I don't have this today. I'm a little bit overwhelmed about the day. God, if you can show me which way to go, that would be really a great help. And and for me, it's as conversational as that. Um, but yeah, I guess I've been talking about step 11, but that's kind of what step three has looked like for me, man.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's like the third step prayer changed my recovery and life immensely. The third step prayer I have in my wallet, like the third step prayer is something that for me, I really needed to do every single day, much like you were saying, get on my knees. I read the third step prayer 3 times, and then I close my eyes for 3 minutes, and I'm 3.5 minutes. And I need that. Once I started that, I could feel when I hadn't done it. You know what I mean? I
Mm,
think you know what I mean by that. Like if you
mhm.
do miss it or whatever, you miss it by a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like it's interesting that it works that way. And it's interesting that in the actual step it said made a decision to turn our will, and the our will is first, and it's first and foremost because we need to attack kind of along the lines of step 1 and 2, our will got us to reading the 12 steps. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
And
you
so
said it.
we need to make a decision to turn that will over to something else because it wasn't working from my perspective. And along with that, our lives over to the care of our higher power. It's kind of just like there's a lot of, if you can do that, there's a lot of power in doing that. And I know that might appeal to someone like thinking about it, or to me if someone had explained it to me in that way. It's like you have to understand there's so much power in being powerless,
Yep.
but you need to be powerless first, right? Like once you believe that you're powerless, once you turn your will and your life over to this, whatever it is, it could be anything. You just need to get it out of you. Like you. And once you do that, you will be surprised how invigorating that is and how on fire with your recovery you could become, because it's like that is what is holding us back. That is what is keeping you out. That is what
Yep.
is keeping you going. Like you're questioning why you can't get it, or it won't stick, or you don't like it. It's you. You know what I mean? And it always has been and it always will be. Like at the end of the day, no one is going to hold your hand through this. No one is going to like, you can do all the treatments you want. And like for me, it was explained early and harshly, like, which I respond to typically better, that it's just like, this is your decision. You know what I mean? We can send you to a treatment center. We could send you to an AA meeting. We could give you a good sponsor. We could support you. This is your decision. It really, it doesn't, like all of this stuff, the podcast and everything, all of that stuff, if you're listening, it's like you have to sit down and close your eyes and be like, do I want to feel this way? Do I want to continue to feel this way? Do I want to continue to live this way? You know what I mean? It just really comes down to that. And for me, I just couldn't do that anymore. Like I could, but I would have died, and I didn't want to die. You know, there was a part of me, I've split my brain into like my addiction side and my sober side. And that voice in the back of my head that's like looking out for me was like, bro, you need to do this or this is it. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It had to be a decision within myself. And through that, I could start to eat away and give away my self will and move forward in my recovery and in my life. But
right.
I mean, not to get preachy on you, but like I'm passionate about that because I think a lot of people think like if I do this, and this, I'll be good. But if at the foundation of that, you're doing it for someone else, or you're doing it because you're being told to, because I did this, bro. I did this early recovery stuff because I was told to. A little part of me wanted to do it. And guess what? I lived in a mental hell for 3 years because of that.
Mm,
Like, and when I say that, it's not a joke. Like, I'm talking full mental, like, craziness. I was crazy, bro, while in recovery. And so it's just, we have a lot of conversations with family and friends of alcoholics and addicts, and they're like, I was talking to this person a couple days ago. They're like, they can't get it. Like it was one of their siblings. They're like, they can't get it. I don't know why they won't just get it. Like, we do we do all these things for them. We do this. We've sent them all these places. And I'm just so upset with them because they can't get it. And
mm,
I was like, I think that you should be, first of all, I was like, I hear you, but I think that you should try to be supportive, let them know that you love them, let you know that you're going to support them in any way that you can. And if that boundary has to move backwards, if I have to support you from afar and farther and farther and farther, I still will. But, I basically told this person that it's like, it has to be their decision. Like, it's just like, it doesn't, I hate saying it doesn't matter because I think it does matter. But at the end of the day, it just has to be their decision. You know what I mean? And that is the hardest thing for people outside of recovery to understand, I think. Like, you have all these families and friends that think like do all this stuff and they'll get it. It'll snap. But I mean, bro, you could have the best lineup ever. The best lineup ever. Have a great conversation with them. I mean, I've sat down and talked with people, great conversation, and then I heard they relapsed like a couple of days later.
mm.
So, I mean, it's just uh it has to be you. I think I tried to narrow, and when I say it has to be you, that might sound ego, but it has to be your initial decision. You have to take that first leap of faith into it, and then you can go forward from that.
Yeah, bro. I mean, like I'm responsible for my own recovery.
Right.
It's nobody else's responsibility but my own.
Mm.
Um, that was a difficult thing for me to kind of grasp too. And along the same lines, like this step, we make a decision to turn our will and our lives. It doesn't say a small part of it. It doesn't say we turn over the parts of our will and our parts of our lives that we want to. It doesn't say that we turn over the parts that are difficult for us to handle, but we get to keep certain parts because this is why this step limited me is because through my childhood, through my adolescence, through like my formative years and the kind of the blossoming of this addiction, um, I held on to attitudes, resentments, grudges, fears, angers, everything else that I thought protected me, like kept me at a safe distance from people, kept me from getting too close to people, kept people from hurting me. I held on to certain ways that I acted, whether it was in relationships, whether it was with friends, whether it was with family, whether it was with myself, whether, like we can't halfway do this step. We
Yeah.
can't do it. We
Let's
can't
fucking read
do,
it, bro.
yeah. I mean, we can't do
Half
any of
measures.
these steps halfway. I mean, if you read how it works, like you're saying, like half measures availed us nothing. But I think people kind of gloss over that. Like
It's huge.
I have glossed over it.
Yeah, me
I
too.
mean, I'm not even saying people like me. I
Right.
have glossed over this inevitable fact is that because I gave over like what I'm saying is I gave over the will and the life of the active addicts, right? I gave over, all right, God, take my will to do drugs away from me and take my tendency to want to overconsume away from me and take all of that, like the substance related stuff away from me. Take that life away. I'm going to hand that over to you. But the stuff that I thought served me, like the manipulative behavior and
Mm.
the dishonesty and the the egotism and the thinking I'm better than others and the comparing myself with others and the being in constant competition and holding that as a resentment with everyone around me and not to mention I know resentment is in step 4 but not to mention all those resentments that I'm holding on to. I'm gonna keep those because
Yep.
they serve me.
Yep.
um and that's not what this step says. Like
Mm-mm.
it's turn our will and our lives over like completely.
Over. Yeah, I wish they had completely in there.
Like because that's what it means. I wish
Right.
they did too. um and you know that has been difficult for me even actively in this moment. Like it's there are parts of me that I don't want to turn over because it starts that self-pity like fucking circus of well, I don't drink and I don't drug anymore and I'm sober and I go to meetings and everything else. Why can't I just keep this one little like defects? Like
I gotta
why
read
can't I
something
keep
off
this
that.
attitude?
Yeah.
Like I like this one. It's fun.
Yeah, right.
Like but that's not what this is all about. Like and that halfway shit,
Mm.
like that's gonna lead me to relapse.
Yeah,
That I'll
for
use
sure it
over
will.
that eventually
For sure it will.
because now I know that I'm doing something wrong.
You're
Now
saving
I
it.
know that my action is incorrect.
Hmm.
Like it's like the fog has cleared a little bit. And
Yeah.
I can see now, okay, well, this is not a good thing. And I don't have the drugs or the alcohol now to mask it in me, but I don't want to turn it over because I'm just not ready yet.
Mm.
But what is that going to do? It's like splitting my soul in half. It's like part of it is healing, and the other part is still engaged in this behavior that is completely unacceptable and out of line with my values, dude. Like,
Why, bro, I gotta read this because you're absolutely murdering it, and it's straight out the book, like straight off the beginning in chapter 5 for how it works before we're introduced to the steps. This is like a paragraph in. It says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then
Mm,
you are ready to take certain steps. And this is where this is what you just said. At some of these, we balked, talking about the steps. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With
mm,
all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. I mean, off jump. You feel me? Some
mm,
of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And that leads straight into talking about half measures availed us nothing. And so, I mean, it's right there, right in the beginning before you even get the steps. If you really get into that, and that's exactly what you're saying about like, I mean, I read that and I still went on and was like, I think the easier, softer way sounds good.
mm,
And
mm.
it did for me, it didn't work.
I want an easier, softer way. I'm an addict. I want to cut
Right.
corners.
Right.
Like I'm like, is there a way that I can cheat? Like, because
Yep.
I'll cheat. Like, is there a way that I can? Is there a way I can achieve the same end and not have to work as hard? I will absolutely do it.
Mhm.
Like that's how I work. Um, and I don't know, switching gears a little bit too. Like this is at the same time, this is where my conception of God started to be formulated was
Mhm.
around this step, right? And I don't know, I'm kind of curious. We've talked about it a little bit before in the spirituality episode, but I kind of want to know, like, because I know your uncle played a role, right? And you got those. Is it? It's not 333. What are the numbers?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it
you're
three
right.
three three?
Yeah,
Right?
you're right.
And I don't know because I think your experience with that is different. It's different than mine. And so I'd like to hear because I think a lot of people get stuck up on that. Like, what do I have to, like, does it have to be the dude with the cane and the
Yeah.
white robe and it does. My experience is that it doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean that's big. And it's like trying to figure that out is hard and can be like, I can't do that. I don't know what to pick.
Mm,
And it's like it's not really something to pick. You know what I mean? If it's just gonna be it's just has to be outside of you. Like we're trying to get outside of you. And so for me, my I was named after my uncle who committed suicide, and I was told that early, and I was told also early that he's like watching over you, and that that stays right. I mean, I literally have his name, so it's like for me when I was feeling when I was isolating or isolated through my addiction, I would turn to believing in him or believing in like that kind of someone has to be watching out for me, because I had so many close calls and this and that and the other. And so for me, the 333 was like a number that I would see, a lot. And it can be considered corny, whatever you want to call it. For me, it's not. And it's like, I had seen it in high school. I saw it in college. I was up at 3:33 in the morning quite often. And uh, the thing that locked it in for me was that when I was going to rehab, when I finally made that decision that I'll go to rehab, I pulled up to the airport. I was all fucked up. I hadn't looked at my ticket yet. I fucking pull out my ticket and the departure time to go to South Carolina to go to rehab. The departure time was 3:33, and I had already seen that for years. And you can't make it up. I mean, I still have that airplane ticket. I knew that I had to keep that. And for me, that's like a cornerstone thing. And like, it's just little things like that that solidify there's something going on that's greater than me. There just has to
mm,
be. I mean, how you and I met each other, my initial sobriety date is your fucking birthday. I mean, come
yep.
on. I mean, like, it's just stuff like that where it's like, and I have it almost on a daily basis where it's like, fuck, like, that was kind of wild. You know what I mean? No such thing as coincidences type thing. It just is what it is. And
Mm,
yeah, I think that's how it
mm,
developed for me. That's how even when I was in rehab, I was like, really trying to get in contact with that higher power, because that's the part of it that was trippy for me. I knew it was there and I acknowledged it, but getting into conscious contact with that higher power, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think and I think you're an example of this too, because it has grown and developed and changed. Is like I don't think it's a steadfast rule that our higher powers have to remain the same
Yeah.
like throughout our recovery. Like, and I know I'm almost 100% sure you know this like line or whatever from AA is, if you don't want to, if you're having trouble with the God problem, like use AA as your higher power.
Yeah.
God is a group of drunks.
Yep. Seeing
Like,
your higher power in other people is huge.
mm, and like it's very simple when it's boiled down to its core is a higher power is a power outside of myself. Like, and it's funny, I think it's really cool that you have, you know, with your uncle and you being named after him and kind of it being repeated to you early that he's watching over you. Like you had that basis of spirituality early, I think, and moving through with the numbers and seeing 333 everywhere. Like 2 years ago, I would have explained that away as a coincidence. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
coincidence. Like what you're off of your, you're off your rocker, dude. Like you're missing some screws. Like you're seeing it, you're looking at numbers, but that's not. It's almost like, what's the point of living like that? Like of living is just that there's no miracles. Like
Right.
I'd much rather live in a world full of miracles.
I agree.
Like, and
And
yeah, go ahead.
well, just real quick, and it's like I grew to a spot where it's like I heard other people talking about their religion, their passion, what works for them, and I was like poking holes at what works for them, bro.
Mm-hmm.
How fucked up is that? Like, you
Right.
just shared with me that you believe in this and this is how you live a daily life, and like this is what helps you on a day-to-day basis. And my response to that is that's not true. I don't believe
No.
in that. Have you ever heard about this? Don't you question that? That's fucked up. I was like, that was like when I once I started putting that together when I was going through some other stuff, it was like, damn, bro, I was so hateful. Like,
Hateful, man.
and
And
now
it's
I'd like, well, yeah, now it's like, you could be someone could be in a position to hear what I just said and be like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. You know what I mean? And that's fine. It's honestly, it's like we've been saying this whole time. It's what you need for you, what works for you, what you need to believe in and what you do believe in. And that's your thing, bro. And that's a big change too. Not tripping off other people's stuff. Cause like if you told me you believed in that Ray Lewis wallpaper, I would be like, hell yeah, bro. You know what I mean? So
Listen, I don't want to hear any hate about Ray Lewis wallpaper. I know you're a Ravens fan.
yeah, I had an Anquan Bolden one. It's a fat head. So
Um
I feel you.
my tendency to do that, like to ridicule others and their higher powers and to point holes, and that's like somebody told me when we're hurt on the inside, when we're hurt and we're questioning and we're full of fear and insecurity on the inside, we direct it outwards
For sure.
because we want others to feel the same way we do.
For
We
sure.
want others to be we miserable as us, and for them to for us to not be alone in this misery.
Mm.
And I think I did that too for a long time. Like no reason, just because I didn't have the courage to believe. I was hateful. um and it's something I have to continue to work on, but kind of move like it's funny because my higher power is very different than yours. I have a very different experience. And I think it's something that's common in AA is maybe not as common as I think, but I found quite a few people who kind of have the same vein of thought. Is I like being outside. I like being in nature. Hiking, swimming, whatever it is. I do a lot outside, and it's very tough, Mitch, to sit on the top of a mountain that's 15,000 feet high, or to hike in the redwoods, or to stand looking at the Atlantic Ocean, or any of that. Like, or to just even something as small as just like walking along a river and seeing things that are alive, and like just the life of an ecosystem, like, and the life of nature at large. Like, it's incredibly difficult to sit in any one of those situations and deny that there's a power greater than us.
For sure.
Like, and it's not, it's not very personal. I'll get like that's maybe a weakness of it, but I don't think it really detracts very much from it. It's simple, and in the beginning it helped me. My that's what my sponsor told me. He said, "Why don't you take a walk in, there's a state park in our town. Why don't you take a walk in the state park and try to identify the trees you made? Tell me which ones that were your responsibility." And
That's good.
and I came back and
Yeah.
I said I didn't find a single one. And he was like, "All right, well, we don't really need a debate about who made them, but we know it wasn't you. Um, so we
Got a
know
good
that
sponsor, bro.
that you're not number one out
Yeah,
here." Um, and I don't know, it's changed. I think nature is a very powerful higher power, a very, very, effective way to look at it. I think I had God problems continually in my first year and continue to struggle with it sometimes just because of my preconceived notions. Um, my sponsor got me to challenge me. My sponsor got me a book called Jesus Calling. And it's got daily readings, and it's Christian based. So, they're using the name Jesus and God. And he told me, if you're having problems with God, replace every time they say God or Jesus with a loving force.
mm,
And he says the result, he said to me, Andrew, the result is the same. Like, God and Jesus are a loving force. And if the names, like, don't get caught up in the names.
that's big.
Like, if those are the things that are gonna hold you back, then change the goddamn names.
Right.
Like, because the message is the same. Like, that there's something bigger than us that is a loving force, whatever it is, that if we, in accordance with these steps, give our will and our lives over, like, beautiful things can start to happen.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, I
that's what he
completely
taught
agree.
me.
I love that. Love
Yeah,
that.
man.
Well, hell yeah.
And I
I,
think, like, you know, I think the way we're doing this is pretty cool too. Um, because, like, this is kind of how I have it outlined in my head, is like these three steps are like a pod, like, grouped together. Not that you take them all at the same time, but like 1 through 3 are along that same vein. Like, as we move into 4 and beyond, like, I think, like, the viewer will see. But the other thing too is, like, dude, I'm so grateful for you, because I'm sitting here, and you know I am guilty of, like, taking these 3 steps in my recovery and not necessarily forgetting them, but being like, all right, yeah, I got it. Like, and I don't got it. Like, my perception is so limited. Like, and you've just educated me. Like, you've given me, an, not to inflate the ego here, but you've given me, like, such a clean perspective on these steps. And it's just another reason, like, every single time we record, I get reminded like, oh, well, it looks like I'm not the ultimate authority after all.
Yeah. Well, I'd say the same to you, bro. I learned something from you every single time, and I'm extremely grateful for you as well. I mean, we basically just ripped like a book study meeting, which is sick, which is used to be my meetings that I'd run and hide from. But there, I mean, once you really get into the words in this book, it's like pretty clear. Well, you know. So I appreciate you going through those first three steps with me. And I appreciate that compliment, but to be honest, something that my sponsor has narrowed into me. I was just told, and you've said this to me before. I think I complimented you one time, and you were like, "I'm just passing on what someone else much wiser than me said." You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And that's all we're doing. This isn't. I am not. I don't really spew out original ideas anymore. You know what I mean?
No.
It is very much passing down what I've been told. So I appreciate that, but that somebody else taught me that. So, but thank you again for doing steps 1 to 3 with me. I'm excited to get into 4, 5, and 6, or however we break it up. But these three are great to start with, and I think we opened it up a pretty good amount and try to set it up to be as clear as possible from our perspective. So I'll be interested to see the feedback on this one for sure.
Yeah, I think like you said, yeah, I've been taught and I've learned that my original thoughts are usually shit. Um, so yeah, I don't think I've said anything in the last hour and a half that I came up with. That's
Yeah,
for
right.
damn sure.
And that's perfectly okay.
And that's all right with me. And I
Yeah, me
think
too.
this is what you're talking about, right? Between ridiculing ourselves or thinking that we're like awesome, we're in the middle.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
I didn't come up with this stuff,
Yeah,
and it's not my doing, and I didn't. This is not a lesson from Andrew and Mitch. No,
right.
this is
Not at all.
stuff that we were taught. But on the other side of the coin, like I am encouraged by the fact that I have taken suggestions. Like, and again, like it's that's that middle ground. Like, am I perfect? No. Have I grown? Yes. Will I grow more if I stick to this? Yes.
Mm, that's
And
important.
that can be a thing called like healthy self-confidence, man.
Boom. I agree.
Like humility and self-confidence can coexist.
Yes, they can. I
Mm,
agree.
I don't know, bro. I think we're good examples of that. And that's my ego talking, and I'll probably have to pray on that later.
We're trying to be. We're trying to be. I think we're doing well. I mean, I think everything that we've talked about today and in this book and stuff is work for us, and that's all it comes down to. It's work for you. It's work for me, and we wanted to share that. So that's all it is. Um, but thank you so much. I love you, bro. Appreciate you. I'm excited to get into more of the steps. And
Mm.
Christmas is. I think this will be coming out on Christmas. Is Christmas on a Sunday or a Monday?
Sunday.
Sunday. So this will be coming out the day. Or oh no. Scratch everything I just said. It's coming out soon. Um, we'll have a different one coming out on. I don't know. I don't know what I'm
We don't
talking
know what's
about.
going
I
on.
don't know what's going on. Throw away everything. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Love you, bro. Thank you so much. Episode 18. Keep coming back.
I'll keep coming back. Love you, bro.
Love you too.